Something happened on Welcome to Plathville that nobody saw coming. The cameras stopped rolling, the storylines vanished, and fans were left staring at empty screens, wondering why their favorite reality show just disappeared. It wasn't just another hiatus. It wasn't a casual break or a decision based on ratings. There's a storm behind the scenes, a storm full of legal threats, secret settlements, and a network trying desperately to bury the truth. Tonight, we're going to uncover what really happened, and trust me, it's bigger than anything you've seen on reality TV before. Hi friends, I'm Sophie, and welcome to Reality Scandals Daily. If you love getting the real scoop behind your favorite shows, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss a moment. And while you're at it, drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think about this. This story isn't just about a TV show. It's about people, power, and the messy truths that get hidden when money and reputation are on the line. Let's start with the family. Olivia Plath, strong, independent, and careful to protect her own brand and identity. On screen, she came across as the level-headed voice, trying to hold her family together while navigating the chaos around her. Then there's Ethan Plath, a young man whose struggles were no secret on the show. Watching him on camera, you could see the pressure, the emotional weight, the way certain scenes pushed him to his limits. And of course, Kim Plath, the matriarch, whose personal mistakes, the DUI, the public scrutiny, shifted the entire dynamic of the show and created a whirlwind the network couldn't ignore. These aren't just characters, these are real people caught in a storm of their own lives being manipulated for television. The family drama was complicated, yes, but the real tension was happening behind the scenes. Legal threats were brewing, the network was on edge, and fans had no idea what was coming. What looked like a normal reality show was actually teetering on the edge of a corporate and legal crisis. Every smile on camera, every argument, every family moment had layers of unseen pressure beneath it. This isn't just a story about entertainment. It's about control, about how a network tried to manage its own liability while pushing the limits of its cast. And it's about one woman, Olivia, standing up and saying enough is enough. Over the next several minutes, I'm going to take you behind the curtain, into the moments that were left out of the episodes, the secrets scrubbed from public view, and the choices that ultimately led to the show's abrupt end. By the time we're done, you'll understand why Welcome to Plathville didn't just end, it was silenced. So buckle up, friends, share your thoughts below, subscribe if you haven't yet, and let's dive into the hidden story the network didn't want you to see. Watching Welcome to Plathville over the years, you could see the change happening slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. What started as a family-centered reality show, giving viewers a glimpse into a unique household, gradually morphed into something darker. It was no longer just a story about family life. By the later seasons, the show had become a pressure cooker, a stage where real emotions were amplified, manipulated, and sometimes weaponized for drama. The cameras were rolling, but what they captured wasn't always organic. It was carefully guided to provoke, to push, and to escalate conflict. A turning point came with Kim Plath's DUI. Up until that moment, the family had its challenges, sure, but the show maintained a veneer of relatability. Kim's legal troubles, however, transformed her from a matriarch trying to navigate her family into a liability for the entire production. The network suddenly had to deal with a star who carried legal and public consequences. This wasn't just about entertainment, it was about potential lawsuits, insurance complications, and moral responsibility. TLC's parent company was now on alert. The very figure who had been a cornerstone of the show had become a source of risk. Meanwhile, Ethan's emotional journey became increasingly visible. In earlier seasons, his struggles were subtle, a young man finding his place in a complex family. But by the final seasons, the editing and production began highlighting his vulnerabilities in ways that were troubling. Emotional breakdowns were drawn out. Conversations were framed to appear more volatile than they might have been in real life. Arguments that may have been minor in the moment were edited into epic battles. You could see the toll on him. His distress wasn't just television content, it was real, and the network was aware. The tension in the later seasons wasn't limited to Ethan or Kim, it spread throughout the family. Scenes that were filmed as casual interactions were sometimes nudged by producers to elicit stronger emotional reactions. There were subtle pressures, prompting certain questions, emphasizing particular conflicts, or lingering on moments that caused discomfort. On screen, it might have seemed like natural drama, but the behind-the-scenes reality was that the network was actively shaping these emotional peaks for maximum engagement. The episodes reflected a growing pattern where the line between storytelling and manipulation became dangerously thin. It wasn't just a matter of producing interesting television. Each heightened argument, each tearful confrontation, each edited confession was a legal and moral gamble. Ethan's outbursts, Kim's public missteps, and the family's private tensions were being exposed and amplified. The network profited from this exposure, but it also opened itself to liability. Emotional distress, defamation of character, and questions about consent and mental well-being became real risks. The family was being pushed to their limits, and the show's pursuit of drama was fueling a ticking time bomb. Episodes in the final seasons provide clear examples of this shift. One moment, a seemingly ordinary family meeting, is edited to highlight disagreement and tension, making minor comments appear as personal attacks. Another, a simple conversation between Ethan and Olivia about daily routines, is framed alongside flashbacks and commentary to suggest manipulation or malintent. The editing made viewers feel there was a pattern of cruelty, and while it created suspense and drama on screen, it also magnified the emotional strain for the family. Through all this, the audience saw fights and confrontations, but they didn't see the pressures behind the camera. The production team's pursuit of sensational moments created a landscape where cast members were vulnerable, relationships were strained, and mental health became a secondary concern. The family-friendly reality show that fans once knew had become a testing ground for emotional extremes, and the network was complicit at every stage. By the time the final season rolled around, the patterns were clear. This wasn't just storytelling. It was a calculated amplification of personal pain, designed to captivate viewers but leaving the cast exposed. The risks weren't hypothetical. They were present in every scene, every edited clip, every interaction the network chose to frame in a certain way. The moral and legal implications were stacking up, and the show was moving toward a breaking point that nobody could ignore. Welcome to Plathville wasn't just a reality show anymore. It was a case study in the consequences of emotional manipulation, corporate pressure, and the human cost of turning private struggles into entertainment. And this, friends, is where the real story begins. The moments that made one cast member, Olivia Plath, decide that enough was enough. Olivia Plath was no stranger to reality TV. She knew the cameras could capture her life, but she didn't expect her entire identity, her career, and her reputation to become fodder for someone else's storyline. Over the seasons, Olivia built herself a brand outside of the show. She was a professional photographer, a social media influencer, and a woman known for her independence and composure. Her reputation mattered, not just for herself, but for her future opportunities, partnerships, and the people who trusted her work. On Welcome to Plathville, the editing started to work against her. Scenes were framed in ways that didn't reflect reality, conversations were cut to emphasize conflict, and moments that showed her in a rational or empathetic light were often left out. Over time, Olivia noticed a shift. The rebel hero narrative that had once supported her brand was being replaced with a storyline portraying her as difficult, manipulative, or even the cause of the family's problems. Comments from fans changed, brand inquiries slowed. The public image she had carefully cultivated began to feel under siege. This wasn't just frustrating, it was damaging. Every episode, every clip edited for maximum drama, carried real-world consequences. Olivia began documenting every instance where she felt misrepresented. She kept notes on specific scenes, tracked how editing changed the context of her words, and recorded the ways these portrayals were affecting her interactions online. Negative comments, harassment, and speculation weren't just fleeting annoyances, they were the fallout from a narrative she hadn't agreed to and which threatened her livelihood. Her documentation was meticulous. She kept track of season after season, noting edits, timing, and even juxtaposition choices that made her look unreasonable or emotionally unstable. Every manipulated clip, every unfair scene added to a dossier that she was quietly building. It was methodical and careful because Olivia understood the stakes. This wasn't about venting on social media. This was about creating an undeniable record of what the show was doing to her image. Then came the airport incident. It wasn't part of the storyline that aired. It happened off camera, or so the audience thought. Olivia and Ethan were going through the painful process of finalizing their divorce. Cameras were rolling for a scene, but the situation escalated beyond what anyone expected. Producers were pressing her to cry, to break down, to provide a reaction that could be edited into another dramatic arc. They pushed and pushed, reminding her that viewers expected raw emotion and that the network needed her performance. At that moment, Olivia snapped. She recognized that the show was no longer about family or telling a story. It was about manipulation and control. She looked at the crew and made it clear that she was done. Her words weren't just a reaction, they were a warning. She reminded everyone that this was her life, that the manipulation they were asking for was causing real harm, and that she had a lawyer prepared to take action. The airport incident became the turning point, the spark that escalated everything into a serious legal matter. From that day forward, Olivia's approach shifted. She was no longer simply reacting to unfair portrayals. She became proactive, documenting every interaction, tracking edits, and monitoring the consequences of her on-screen portrayal. She knew the stakes were high. Any further misrepresentation could hurt her career, her personal brand, and her professional credibility. She was taking control where the show and the network had tried to control the narrative. What's striking about Olivia is her agency in the situation. Many cast members might have felt trapped, silenced, or powerless. She didn't.
She combined careful documentation with a willingness to confront the network directly. The strength wasn't in dramatic confrontations, it was in her preparation, her awareness, and her refusal to let the story told on screen define her reality. She took a situation that could have left her victimized and turned it into a position of power. For fans watching the show, Olivia's fight might have seemed subtle, but behind the scenes it was methodical, brave, and impactful. She reminded everyone watching that reality TV is not reality, and that real people can be harmed when editing choices are made for drama rather than truth. Her actions set in motion the events that would eventually corner the network and bring the show's final chapters to an abrupt, legally driven end. Olivia Plath's story isn't just about confrontation, it's about resilience, awareness, and taking control of one's narrative. She became a symbol of standing up against manipulation, of protecting oneself when the world tries to rewrite your story for entertainment. And that moment at the airport, that decision to no longer comply with manufactured drama, became the catalyst that changed everything, not just for her, but for the entire family and the show itself. By the time Olivia Plath made it clear she would no longer be manipulated for television, the reality of the situation hit the network hard. TLC and Warner Bros. Suddenly found themselves facing a crisis that went far beyond ratings or entertainment value. This wasn't just another family drama or a hiccup in production schedules. This was a legal, financial, and reputational threat that could shake the foundation of the network itself. Every meeting behind the corporate doors became a debate over risk versus reward, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The production team wanted to push forward. They argued that the show had a loyal fan base, that they could continue without Olivia in certain episodes, or that perhaps they could edit the remaining footage creatively enough to minimize conflict. After all, the show had been a cash cow. The earlier seasons had brought in solid viewership and advertising revenue. In the production team's eyes, the drama could be managed, the cast could be persuaded to cooperate, and the storyline could continue. They saw a potential continuation as a win, both financially and creatively, but the legal team saw something entirely different. They were looking at Olivia's careful documentation, her methodical tracking of manipulative editing, and the airport incident as a clear warning sign. This wasn't a bluff. The legal department understood that if Olivia followed through, she could pursue a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for defamation, emotional distress, and damages to her personal brand. And it wasn't just about money. If the case went public, the discovery process could expose every email, every text, every production note that revealed how the network had been shaping the narrative and pushing cast members to emotional extremes. The scandal could spiral, affecting other reality shows and tarnishing the network's image as a family-friendly broadcaster. The stakes were enormous. On one side, there was the potential for continued profits, a few more seasons of a hit show, more ad revenue, and loyal fans who would tune in for the next installment. On the other side, there was the real possibility of a lawsuit that could demand millions, bring unwanted media attention, and permanently damage the network's reputation. Production chaos was also looming. The family was no longer fully compliant, and any attempt to film without Olivia risked escalating conflict, further emotional harm, and public backlash. Every choice carried weighty consequences. What's fascinating here is how the network calculated its options. It wasn't a decision driven by emotion or loyalty to the cast. It was cold, hard business logic. Fighting the lawsuit might have meant continuing the show, but it also meant betting millions on a gamble with no guaranteed outcome. Winning in court would still come with costs, legal fees, potential damages, and irreparable brand damage if details of the manipulation were exposed. Losing or even just going through a protracted legal battle could be catastrophic. Canceling the show, on the other hand, offered control. By halting production and negotiating settlements behind closed doors, the network could contain the situation. They could avoid a public courtroom, prevent embarrassing emails or footage from surfacing, and protect the larger brand. Yes, they would lose future revenue from the show, but they would gain certainty, discretion, and the ability to move on without a public scandal. In essence, they were choosing safety over profit, containment over exposure. Inside the network's war room, the arguments were intense. Producers argued that Olivia's actions could be managed, that they had creative solutions, and that fans would forgive minor gaps in the cast's appearances. Legal counsel countered with a devastatingly simple point. One lawsuit could unravel everything. Emails, internal communications, and production tactics would be laid bare. The narrative of manipulation, carefully curated for ratings, would be revealed as exploitation. Every calculated scene, every forced emotional breakdown, could be exposed to the public. It was no longer a question of a single show. It was a question of the network's credibility. Ultimately, the legal team's argument won. The choice was clear. Cancel the show, settle quietly, and buy silence. It wasn't about punishing the production team or even about fairness to the cast. It was about minimizing risk. Multi-million-dollar damages were a possibility, but the damage to the network's reputation, if it became public, was priceless. Public perception was a fragile thing, and the network understood that one high-profile lawsuit could ripple across its entire slate of programming. This decision reflects the cold logic of corporate risk management. When money, reputation, and legal exposure collide, human drama and fan loyalty often take a back seat. In the case of Welcome to Plathville, the network decided that no amount of future episodes, no loyal fan base, and no potential ad revenue was worth the risk of exposing the truth behind the cameras. They calculated every cost, every potential fallout, and concluded that containment, canceling the show, and negotiating quietly was the only responsible course. From the outside, it might have looked abrupt. Fans were left with a sudden end, vague announcements, and questions about what really happened. But behind the scenes, the network's decision was strategic, deliberate, and meticulously planned. Every moment, every contingency, every possible outcome had been weighed. In the eyes of Warner Bros. And TLC, the risk of continuing the show outweighed any potential gain. Containment became priority number one, and the narrative that viewers had been following was quietly shifted behind a wall of secrecy and legal protection. The story of the network's calculation is a reminder of the tension between entertainment and responsibility. Reality TV thrives on emotion, conflict, and exposure, but there are boundaries. In this case, the human cost, combined with potential legal fallout, created a scenario where the network's choices had to prioritize survival over storytelling. Welcome to Plathville was no longer just a family drama. It was a high-stakes corporate dilemma, a cautionary tale about the consequences of emotional manipulation, and a testament to the power of one individual refusing to be silenced.
Once the decision to cancel the show was made, TLC and Warner Bros. Faced a new challenge, ensuring that the story behind the abrupt end remained under wraps. The network had been cornered by Olivia Plath's careful documentation and the legal threat she posed. If the truth leaked, it could expose manipulative production practices, emotional exploitation, and a family left vulnerable for ratings. The solution? A calculated combination of settlements, payouts, and legally binding agreements that guaranteed silence. For Olivia, the settlement was more than just money. It was recognition of her fight, her agency, and the documentation she had meticulously prepared. She had built a career outside the show, and the narrative being pushed on screen threatened everything she had worked for. The settlement acknowledged that her claims had weight, that the network's manipulations had real consequences, and that her professional reputation mattered. It was a personal victory that stemmed from courage, persistence, and clear evidence. She didn't just protect herself, she forced the network to confront the consequences of its actions. But Olivia wasn't the only family member affected. The network recognized that silencing her alone wasn't enough. Other members of the Plath family could still speak out or contradict the official narrative. To prevent this, the network reportedly structured payouts for everyone involved, effectively compensating them for the final season, even though it would never be filmed. These payouts acted as both financial closure and a subtle incentive to cooperate. By providing the family with a tangible benefit, the network ensured their compliance while minimizing the risk of anyone breaking the story publicly. It wasn't just hush money, it was a way to align the family's interests with the network's. At the core of this strategy were legal agreements. Each family member was required to sign non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, that went far beyond typical confidentiality clauses. These contracts reportedly prohibited them from discussing the show's cancellation, the reasons behind it, Olivia's legal threat, or any negative experiences with production. Violating these agreements would trigger significant financial penalties, including clawbacks of the settlement money. In other words, the legal mechanisms created both a financial and psychological barrier against disclosure. The network didn't just want silence, they wanted absolute control over the narrative. The combination of payouts and NDAs gave the network what insiders have called the silent control of information. On the surface, it looked as if the family had moved on naturally, leaving viewers to assume the show had ended because of creative reasons or ordinary circumstances. Behind the scenes, however, the network was ensuring that no one could speak out without severe consequences. Every social media post, interview, or casual comment was now framed by legal boundaries. Any deviation risked financial loss and legal action. The message was clear: you can live your life publicly, but certain truths remain off limits. Olivia's settlement served as both a warning and an example. It demonstrated that careful documentation, professional awareness, and assertive action could compel a corporate network to negotiate seriously. Her victory wasn't just about money, it was about protecting herself and asserting control over her own story. At the same time, the inclusion of the rest of the family in final season payouts ensured that the network could create an environment of compliance, minimizing the chances that anyone would disrupt the cover-up. It was a strategy designed to neutralize risk while preserving the illusion of normalcy. This approach also highlights the power imbalance inherent in reality television. The family had devoted years to sharing their lives on camera, often at the expense of privacy and emotional stability. When the situation became legally and morally complex, the network responded not with transparency, but with calculated containment. Money and legal agreements became tools to manage perception and maintain control. The audience, meanwhile, remained unaware. Fans continued to follow social media updates, see new projects from the family, and interpret events at face value, all while the real story remained obscured. The silent control of information extends beyond the financial settlements. The network's strategy relied on careful messaging and the absence of public statements. They didn't announce that the show had been canceled because of legal pressure or manipulative production practices. Instead, the official line was vague, leaving fans to fill in the gaps themselves. The family members' social media posts about new beginnings, career moves, or personal milestones followed the guidelines of the NDAs, allowing them to live their lives publicly while legally unable to reveal the truth. The cover-up wasn't messy, it was precise, structured, and ongoing. For viewers, the abrupt end of Welcome to Plathville might have felt confusing or disappointing. For those behind the scenes, it was the result of a deliberate series of decisions designed to protect the network at all costs. Olivia's stand, the settlements for her and the family, and the NDAs all worked together to create a system of control. The show's collapse wasn't accidental, it was orchestrated in response to the very real consequences of emotional manipulation and legal threats. What the audience saw as an ending was actually a carefully managed closure, a silent agreement that kept the truth locked away. The story of the hush money and silent agreements is a reminder of how power operates in reality TV. Networks hold significant leverage, but individuals like Olivia Plath can still assert agency, document evidence, and protect themselves. At the same time, it illustrates how legal and financial tools can be used to suppress information, maintain appearances, and shape public perception. The network ensured the family's silence, controlling the narrative, and keeping the show's final chapter hidden from the public eye. This was more than a cancellation, it was a controlled conclusion, a lesson in corporate risk management, and a testament to the complexity of reality television behind the cameras. The audience saw the end, but the story behind the end was being carefully managed, one settlement and one agreement at a time. Welcome to Plathville didn't just fade from television, it was quietly contained, leaving viewers with questions, the family with compensation, and the network with the ultimate control of the narrative. The disappearance of Welcome to Plathville from TLC wasn't abrupt, it was calculated. The network didn't make a public announcement explaining why the show had ended, and they certainly didn't discuss the legal battle quietly brewing behind the scenes. Instead, they orchestrated the show's exit in plain sight, carefully managing both what the audience saw and what they didn't. To the casual viewer, it might have seemed like the series had simply run its course, or that the family had decided to step away from cameras. The reality was far more complex. TLC's approach was methodical. They didn't release press statements detailing the legal threat from Olivia Plath or the concerns about emotional manipulation on set. There were no interviews clarifying why production had ceased. Instead, the network relied on silence and strategic ambiguity. This created a vacuum of information, and in that vacuum, assumptions filled the space. Fans speculated about creative differences, family choices, or ordinary television scheduling, completely unaware of the high-stakes drama behind the scenes. The cast's messaging was carefully aligned with the network's strategy. Each family member, bound by NDAs and incentivized with settlements, shared updates that adhered to the legal guidelines. Social media posts celebrated new beginnings, career moves, or personal milestones, but these updates never touched on the show's cancellation, the legal conflict, or the manipulation that had occurred. To viewers, it looked like life was moving forward naturally. What was really happening was controlled communication, designed to give the illusion of normalcy while keeping the truth buried. This strategy is what insiders have called the silent acts protocol. It's a term that describes the deliberate fading of a property or individual from public attention while maintaining the appearance of voluntary disengagement. In the case of Plathville, it meant letting the show die quietly, erasing evidence of internal conflict, and ensuring that no public figure could contradict the narrative. Every post, every update, every non-comment by the family contributed to the perception that the show's conclusion was amicable. For fans invested in the drama, this strategy was emotionally manipulative. The narrative they had followed for years, a family navigating complex relationships, triumphs, and challenges, suddenly ended without explanation. The unresolved tensions, the emotional breakdowns, and the raw humanity that had drawn viewers in were replaced with silence and vague optimism. The network relied on the audience's trust in the family's public persona, using it as a shield to obscure the legal and emotional realities behind the scenes. It's easy to forget that reality TV, while often sensationalized, represents real people with real vulnerabilities. Olivia Plath, Ethan, Kim, and the rest of the family were not simply characters on a screen, they were human beings whose lives were impacted by editing choices, narrative manipulation, and corporate priorities. By orchestrating the show's disappearance in this way, the network effectively controlled both the narrative and the perception, leaving fans to interpret events without access to the full truth. From a viewer's perspective, the tactics might feel subtle, almost invisible. There were no dramatic reveals or confrontations in press releases. Instead, the strategy relied on omission. By never acknowledging the legal battles or emotional exploitation, TLC created a public story that masked a far more complicated reality.
The show's absence appeared voluntary, the family seemed at peace, and the narrative of normalcy prevailed. It's a stark reminder that what we see on television is often far from the full story. Watching this unfold is both fascinating and troubling. On one hand, it shows how corporate entities can strategically manage crises, protect reputations, and contain risk. On the other hand, it highlights a troubling dynamic. Audiences are being presented with an incomplete narrative, one shaped by legal constraints and corporate calculation rather than truth. The silence maintained by settlements and NDAs is effective in controlling perception, but it raises questions about transparency, ethics, and the human cost of entertainment. Personally, it's hard not to feel a mix of admiration and frustration. Admiration for Olivia and her careful, courageous stance that forced the network to acknowledge consequences. Frustration for fans and viewers who invested emotionally in a story that was quietly manipulated and controlled without their awareness. The tension between reality TV as entertainment and reality TV as a space where real lives are impacted is stark here. It's a reminder that behind every edited clip or dramatic montage, there are human beings whose experiences can be reshaped for the sake of ratings and image management. The silent control executed by TLC also demonstrates the power imbalance inherent in reality television. Networks hold enormous leverage, capable of shaping narratives and public perception through editing, legal agreements, and financial incentives. Yet one individual with awareness, documentation, and determination can challenge that control as Olivia did. Her actions reveal that while networks may have significant power, they are not invincible. Truth, when pursued carefully, can alter outcomes and force accountability, even if the public remains unaware of the details. In the end, the story of Welcome to Plathville's disappearance is more than just the ending of a reality TV series. It is a case study in corporate risk management, emotional manipulation, and the careful orchestration of public perception. The show didn't vanish by accident, it was quietly contained, leaving fans with an impression of closure, while behind the scenes, settlements, NDAs, and controlled communication ensured the real story remained hidden. For viewers who have followed the Plath family, the lessons are clear. Reality TV often presents a curated truth, and not all endings are as they seem. By understanding the network's tactics, we can better appreciate the human stories behind the drama, recognize the courage of individuals like Olivia Plath, and remain critical of narratives that may be shaped by forces beyond the camera. The silent cover-up serves as a reminder that the truth often exists in the spaces between what is shown and what is deliberately hidden, and that paying attention, questioning, and demanding accountability is the only way to see the full story. At this point, it's impossible to look at Welcome to Plathville the same way. The story of the show's sudden disappearance isn't just about television, it's about power, control, and the lengths a network will go to protect its image. For fans who invested in the Plath family's lives, the events behind the scenes may feel shocking, even unsettling. The emotional highs and lows we watched for years were real, but the narrative we were presented with was carefully curated, shaped by production choices and legal constraints that kept the full truth hidden. Olivia Plath's courage in the face of this situation cannot be overstated. She documented manipulation, stood up for her own professional and personal reputation, and forced a corporate giant to confront its own behavior. Her actions didn't just stop the exploitation, they exposed a broader pattern of how reality TV can prioritize ratings over the well-being of the people on screen. Watching her assert control over her story is a reminder that individuals can reclaim power even when the system seems stacked against them. For viewers, there's an important lesson here. Reality TV often presents a polished, edited version of life. What we see on the screen is rarely the full story, and sometimes the truth is deliberately obscured. The network's careful management of the show's end, the hush money settlements, and the NDAs all demonstrate how easily perception can be shaped without us even realizing it. As fans, it's critical to recognize that behind every dramatic moment, there may be a complex, unseen reality. Emotional manipulation, legal maneuvers, and corporate calculation all play a role in the stories we consume, and it's our responsibility to question, to investigate, and to seek the truth wherever possible. This is why your voice matters. Talk about it. Discuss what you think happened. Consider how the show portrayed the family versus the real events behind the camera. Share your thoughts, theories, and questions in the comments. Encourage your friends to watch, to look deeper, and to see the difference between the polished narrative and the actual experiences of the people involved. Engagement isn't just about clicks, it's about raising awareness, holding networks accountable, and refusing to accept silence as an explanation. At the same time, it's worth reflecting on the emotional toll these dynamics take. The family lived their lives on screen, subject to manipulation and misrepresentation, while the network protected itself through financial and legal leverage. Olivia's stand, combined with the network's calculated response, paints a picture of a system that values control over transparency and ratings over authenticity. Recognizing this is uncomfortable, but it's necessary if we want to understand the true human cost of reality television. So, as we wrap up this story, remember Olivia's courage and the strategic moves that the network used to contain the situation. Recognize that the ending we witnessed on screen was only part of the story. The truth existed behind the cameras, in legal letters, settlements, and silent agreements. And while the public may never see all the details, we can honor the bravery it took to stand up for what was right, to protect a reputation, and to assert agency in a world built on narratives and control. If this story has changed how you view reality television, if it's made you question what you've accepted as truth, then take action. Like this video to show you care about uncovering the hidden realities behind the shows we love. Subscribe to Reality Scandals Daily to follow these stories and others that reveal what's really happening off camera. And most importantly, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, your questions, or your theories about Welcome to Plathville and the Plath family. Keep the conversation alive because the truth deserves to be seen and remembered. The story doesn't end with the show. It continues with us, the viewers, demanding transparency, celebrating courage, and never settling for the narrative we're fed without question. Olivia fought for the truth, and now it's our turn to pay attention, stay critical, and keep asking the questions that networks hope we forget.